Just guessing. A couple of other prayer requests I'd like to ask you to add to your prayer request calendar, and that is next week. Although I am really going to try hard to be here, there's a real good chance I might not be here next Sunday. So with that in mind, I've already asked Dave Beebe to be our preacher next week. So next week, Dave will be bringing our message. It will be the first time he's ever publicly preached. He is excited about that, intimidated by that, and excited about that. And I'm excited because I know his family. He has been witnessing to his family, and he can now do the sermon that he would like them to hear. And then they can watch it on YouTube. And so I am excited about that. Sean will be leading the music next week. And so, and next week starts our Christmas music. So the first song next week is O Come, Emmanuel. We will sing that the first Sunday every week. We're going to sing at least 10 or 15 different songs on the West Side Family Christmas Night on December the 9th. And so I'm excited about that. Who's going to be in charge of planning the Christmas trivia game? I guess that would be somebody. But I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. Because the one question that I love to ask is, what was the name of the donkey? And it wasn't Donkey.
Donkey Kong?
Yeah. I'm going to give you a hint. It wasn't one.
Yeah.
Now you would say, wait a second. I've seen the movie. I ask you to go back and read Luke. And again, on Luke chapter 2, verse number 6, it says that they were there for quite a while before she gave birth. And while they were there, the time eventually came. So she didn't give birth the very night she walked into Bethlehem either. So where did she stay? Oh, we have got some Christmas trivia that you will just love. Continue to pray for all of our elders. They will be leading Sunday school classes on the lineage of Jesus and why the two lineages of Jesus and the ladies in the lineage of Jesus. And so starting next week, we'll all be meeting in the fireside room. It will be great. I am looking so much forward to that. But today we need to finish up on Nehemiah chapter 10. Now let me just say this, that the rest of the book of Nehemiah, chapters 11 and 12, are all about the celebration. And we've pretty much already covered that. So when we come back, we'll hear the rest of the month about Christmas. And then in January, I'm going to start preaching out of the book of Hebrews. And I fully expect it to take approximately 3 years. So you can just pretty much look at your calendar. Anybody remember when we did 3 years out of the Gospel of John? You can't rush through the book of Hebrews. And so we will be in Hebrews at least somewhere between 2 and 3. Now, how many of you last week know that there was a handout that had all of those on there, and we've still got some back there, Stephen? So if we still have some and you didn't get one and want one, we've got those available. Just raise your hand and Stephen will be walking around. We've been talking about the fact that they were making an obligation. Verse number 32 in Nehemiah chapter 10, he says, we will also take on ourselves. Now remember, this is not the church telling you what you must do. These are the people saying, this is what God's word says. We need to be obligated to God, to do God's work God's way, to follow God's word God's way. And so anytime I start saying, I know what the Bible says, but I think I could do it different, that's what it means in Revelation when it says, don't add to or take away from the stories of this. It doesn't mean, if God says this is the way it should be, and this is the way I think, and I think, well, I know God thinks that way, and I know God says that way, but I think I'll apply it differently than the way God applies it. I'll interpret it differently than the way God interprets it. That's adding to or subtracting from. Now remember, it is not the pure number of books. It says if anyone adds to or subtracts from these books, it doesn't mean that we add one more book. Like we all of a sudden we find 3rd Maccabees and say, oh, let's go ahead and put that in the Apocrypha. It says when we add to, that means we add to the way Jesus interpreted it. We add to the way Jesus lived it. We take away from the way Jesus interpreted or lived it. That's how we strike it or write addendums. Now you would say, but what about all the passages that are parenthetical in the New Testament? Well, those are there, but remember, they were there as parenthetically included by God, not by man. And so they were put in there by the inspiration. And so that's why Paul could say, all Scripture is inspired by Paul. the writer of the book, unless one of them was to come back and say, I've got more to add, there's nothing more that is needed. We have got everything we need, the Bible says, for a life of goodness and godliness and self-control. In Leviticus chapter 6 then, it goes on to say that the fire in the temple must never go out. Now, how many of us know that now? Anybody remember the pictures? Can you just barely see the temple on the picture back there? So you can see. And out in front here, there was a thing called the brazen altar. Anybody ever hear of that? And the brazen altar is where they would do a lot of the sacrifices for the people who were the non-Jews who wanted to possibly become Jews. And then inside the temple, main area, there was another altar called the Holy Altar, where they would do most of the other sacrifices during the feasts and times like that. Over to the side, there would be a court of the Jews, and back over to the other side would be court of the women, and all of that was around. You see the big building in the back, and the first door was, remember, the way, and then when you walked inside, that area where the showbread was, and where the candlestick was called the truth, and then the curtain was called and the life. And the life was on the other side of the curtain. So when Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, it was a picture of walking straight on through the tabernacle, through the Holy of Holies. So when Jesus said that, those were not just abstract terms. Those were very well-known terms to the people who understood, especially the priests and the scribes and the Pharisees. They knew he was talking about walking straight through and then opening up the Holy of Holies so that everybody had immediate access to God. And that was blasphemy. Because the only person that could go back there was a chosen priest once and sometimes twice a year, depending on its festive systems. And so that fire must never go out. It says it must burn continually. I've got a fire pit in my backyard. Anybody have a fire pit in your backyard? A fireplace in your house? And you know, how hard is it to keep it burning continually? At one time, we lived in New Mexico, and we had a little a gas heater that had a big butane tank in the backyard. But if we turned it on ever, we could go through $100 worth of butane just that fast. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Go through $100 worth of butane. So we had a wood pellet and a wood stove in the front room. And so every day, part of my job every day was to cut wood. Because that's how we lived at about 6,000 feet above sea level in the mountains in New Mexico. And so every day my job was to cut wood. That was part of my job. And the only way we stayed warm at night was to have a fire in the fireplace all night, every night. Let me tell you, that's a lot of work. Anybody ever cut wood? And so when you cut wood, and I'm not talking about the hydraulic splitters. I'm talking about cutting it. Now I'm not talking about that's dentists. I'm talking about chopping it, sawing it, taking off all the branches. When they said that it must be burning continually, this is a huge job for the city of Jerusalem and all the tabernacles. Now, this is not just some let's just dump off a cord. It was taking care of it, and it must never go out. So in the city of Jerusalem, in every place where there was a synagogue, there had to be a fire, and it had to be burning all the time. All the time. So he has been talking about bringing your first fruits and all of those things. And part of it was taking care of the building, make sure the doors were painted, make sure the water is on, and make sure that the fire on the altars is burning all the time. Now the question is, why? And the answer is because they never knew when somebody might need to come and offer a sacrifice because of the sin in their life. Did you know that for a long time in America, church doors were never locked? Does anybody remember that? Church doors were never locked. Does anybody remember why? Because at any given time, somebody might say, I need to get right with God, and maybe the pastor would be there. How many of us remember when the pastors were required to live in the church? We pastored one church, and the third floor was the pastor's apartment. It was condemned, but it was the pastor's apartment. You could go up there, but we're not allowed anybody to live and or have any kind of meetings up there. But it was neat to go up there and look at it. And just in case you might pass a church along the way, so I got down on my knees and I just determined to pray. Anybody ever hear of an old song that had those lyrics in it? Did you know that those lyrics were true? Because it was true. That churches were open. We started locking them because people started stealing everything out of the church. It says that the church should be available. God should be available. The Holy of Holies should be available when? all the time. To who? Everyone. God wants to be available. Now the religious leaders then said, then we cast lots. And he says, so then we cast lots to see, we the priests, look at verse 34. We the priests, the Levites, and the people have likewise cast lots. Now this word here for cast lots literally means to roll the dice. To flip a coin. Okay, who's going to bring the wood this week? And they cast lots. And they cast lots, and you would say, can God really use casting lots to decide his will? Anybody know in Acts, when they said we need to find somebody to take Judas's place? And so they said we need somebody who's been with us and traveled with us from this time until a certain time. Anybody remember? And they found 2 people that met that criteria. So if they only wanted to fill one, the first question is, why did they just bring both? Does anybody know why? Because the Old Testament said that there will be 12 from 12 sons of Israel. And so they said the 12 was the number so that the 12 apostles will match the 12 sons of Israel. That's the magic number. That doesn't mean that it always has to be 12, but they were continuing the typology. And so they said we can only use one. And it says then that they cast lots. They prayed. God, show us which one. Now, I don't recommend you going up to Table Mountain Casino, saying a prayer, and then rolling the dice. That's okay. Let me answer it for you. I think they were trying to get a hold of me anyway. I told them to call you in if they needed me. And so it says that they cast lots, and the lot fell on Matthias. Now, I know a lot of people who say this, that they never should have done that. They should have waited for Paul. You know, there are a lot of theological debates, but I believe this, that if God was not in it, if they said, we're going to cast lots, or we'll flip a coin, heads or tails, he would have ended up on his side. On me. If I believe that God is sovereignly in control, and I pray, and the answer comes back such and such, then I've got to believe that what? Either I prayed falsely, I testified falsely about the faith of the casting of the lots, or I need to be aggressively behind the decision and the outcome. You might say it was the lottery pick of draft choices. You know, there are a lot of teams at the end of the year when they can't win, they say, let's just lose the rest of our games so we get the lottery pick. And so this would be the lottery pick. They cast lots. And people might be saying, oh, I sure hope it doesn't come on me. I believe that at this particular time there were people right now who were saying, I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to do this. And they probably, I can't prove this, they probably had so many people wanting to bring the wood. Now, why didn't they just let them all bring the wood? They had too much wood. Where do you store it all? One time we had a family that had a problem. And so we asked the church to help this family out. And they brought them so much food that most of the food rotted. They just couldn't eat it all. They couldn't refrigerate it all. And that's why we try to, spread it out some so that they get plenty, but none of it goes to waste. How would you like to know that, that your banana pudding went to waste because they didn't have time to get to it? And so they had a lottery pick. Now the lottery pick was who gets to bring the wood. And everybody was possibly wanting to because they were looking for ways. They were going beyond the letter of the law. They wanted to do everything. Beginning up in verse number 35 now. Isn't that, let me just stop for a second. Isn't that different than how too many churches are happening today? Instead of people saying, let me, let me, let me, too many churches are saying, not me, not me, not me. Did you know that in many churches, if we ask people, could we have your telephone number and email address? They'll say no. Can we have a visitor's card? No. May we visit you? No. May we know what your name is? No. I mean, I've even had people at this particular church when I walked up and I said, hi, my name is Pastor Ray. And all they said is, nice to meet you. No name back. We live in a society that wants to be incognito. And so here are people that are saying, not only do we want to come to church, what can we do? Let me help, let me help, let me help, let me help. Ooh, me, 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 ooh, me, 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 me. Now, beginning now in verse number 35, it says this, and we obligate ourselves. Now, let me just say that this comes from Exodus 23, where it says, and bring the first fruits of your soil to the house of the Lord your God, not just for the priest's income, but it was a symbol that God was the owner of everything that you had. It was not just a discipline of giving 10%. It was actually a dependence upon God that you believe that God could help you to live on the rest. Now, how do we know that to be true? Anybody remember the lady that we don't even know her name? We just know how much she gave. She gave a mite. Anybody remember her? And we don't even know her name. We just know her name was the widow who gave a mite. And the mite was the smallest coin that had actually been pressed into existence at that time. And it says there that it was the time just before Jesus was crucified, and they were watching the temple, and they were watching the people throw in their offerings. Now, back then they would have a very large, and I kept my keys up here so I could do this illustration again, but they would have these very large coffers, and the coffers looked like a trumpet or a tuba at the top. And then they would narrow down as they would go down into, and then have a great big pot on the bottom. So it really looked like a tuba, and then a small spot, and then a big spot. I know this sounds kind of gross, but it looks sort of like a spittoon. And what they would do is they would throw their offerings in. They would cast their offerings in. So they would go up to them, and they would go, bing, and it would bring attention to them. So many of them would throw in as many coins as possible to draw attention to themselves. And that's why Jesus said, so when you give, don't give in such a way that you draw attention to yourself. And this woman went up, and it says that she slid in. She didn't want to be noticed. She may have been too embarrassed by the size of the gift. But she slid it in. And you remember what Jesus said? I tell you the truth. This woman gave more than all of the rest. Now, I will say in Greek, it can be interpreted two different ways. She gave more, meaning more than anybody else gave, or more than everybody else gave, combined. And the disciples were amazed. Because they knew that they should have heard the bangity, 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 bangity. But they didn't hear anything. And he said it was not because of the size of the gift, but the dependence upon God that she had to have in order to live on what was left. And what was left? Just her dependence upon God. Is God really the owner of everything? The answer to that is yes. I've had a lot of people say, and I had a couple of people say to me this week, the New Testament never teaches tithing. Yes, it does. It teaches that Jesus said in Matthew 5:17 that he has not abolished anything from the Old Testament. So that means it affirms all of the teachings of the law. So if it affirms all the teachings of the law, and Exodus says that we are supposed to bring a tenth to our local church, and anything above and beyond that is an offering, your tithe goes to the church in where you labor and where you work. The church where you go. The church where you learn. And everything above that, you send the third shekel to them. It went way beyond just giving. In Exodus, it just said to bring the first fruits. But notice what they say. We obligate ourselves to bring the first fruits of our ground and the first fruits of our fruit trees year by year to the house of the Lord. And also in verse number 36, that means they are going beyond the letter of the law. Now, if you were here last week, I said this. If all we ever do is follow the letter of the law, we miss God's intention for the law. Because the letter of the law was just a checklist. Did it, did it, did it, did it, did it. And that's what became Pharisaicalism and legalism. We think we get saved by just following the letter of the law. In other words, it is man's moral obligation to follow the letter of the law so man saves himself. And that's legalism. I get saved by what I do, not being saved, being chosen and called and saved by Christ alone. And so he says we obligate ourselves to do this and to bring to the house of our God, to the priests who minister in the house of our God, the firstborns of our sons and of our cattle and of our herds and of our flocks. This goes way beyond, because God deserves the first of everything in my family. Now, if you go back and you read Numbers 18:16, it says this, the firstborn was not to be sacrificed. Did you know that even in Israel, they still had human sacrifice? And many times it was the first son. And so they would go ahead and kill. He says, I don't want you to kill the first son. But it does say this. I want you to bring the first of everything. And the firstborn son was supposed to be brought to the temple so that you could buy him back with a price. That's exactly what it says in Numbers 18. You know, many times when we think of Paul saying that in 1 Corinthians 6, we think that Paul said that because it was an idea that he thought of, that God gave him at the time. No, he was actually just reminding everybody what was written in the law. That you were supposed to bring it and then buy him back with a price. Does anybody see the picture? You have been bought with a price. Therefore, glorify God with your living body, not your dead sacrifice. You see, Jesus is not a dead sacrifice. He is the living, first and only Son of God who is bought back by God. God himself did this with his one and only Son. What an incredible thing. And the price was 5 shekels of silver. It wasn't just an indiscriminate amount. Well, I think I'll go buy my son back. Well, what's your son worth? Well, he's not worth anything. Or my son is so valuable, 5 shekels of gold. They had a price, and it was fair for everybody. And everybody knew it. And God had a price. And God's Son was fair for everybody. And everybody should. We have been bought with a price. Again, 1 Corinthians 6 and 1 Corinthians 7, if you want those passages. And you would say, but that's not on the paper you handed me. I know. So that's why I'm going to leave this slide up there just a little bit longer. Okay. And on top of all of this, have you ever noticed when somebody gets a good idea, it's and we could do this, and we could do this, and we could do this, and we could do this. You know, I've been in those planning meetings when people were excited about what was going to happen. You know the difference between a growing church and a non-growing church? A growing church will say something like, all right, we're going to have a kids' worship day, and we're going to trim the tree, and we're going to make cookies, and we're going to have chocolate, and couldn't we do maybe a gift exchange, and couldn't we? That's the growing church. The other church is, we're going to have a kids' day. Oh, who's going to pay for that? Who's going to be in charge of this? You know, that never works. We've never done it that way before. Anybody see the difference? The excited church is, what can't we do? The non-excited church will say what? Who's going to pay for it? Now, don't get me wrong. We should not be ridiculous with our finances. But we should be excited about what God is doing. And he says, and on top of this, notice that, and on top of this, we will then also bring our tithes to the temple in the town in which we labor. Again, just saying, this is exactly what we do. And the Levites shall bring up a tithe to the house of God. And then the local temple will send then a percentage, a tenth, to the big temple in Jerusalem. Now, how many of us know that we are not a denominated church? We are not. We choose to associate with a group of churches called Next Generation Churches, and we have missionaries that we support, and we have a camp that we support, and we have activities and church plants that we support, but we are not a denomination. We are a denomination-free church, sometimes called a community church or a non-denominational church, meaning no one can tell us exactly what to do and how to do it. I will say that in our particular function, there's only one thing that we agree on, and that if anybody goes beyond being licensed in the ministry, being ordained in the ministry, all the rest of the church, we want to make sure that we're bringing people in that all have a unified understanding of what that is and what we believe. So we have an ordination council that we work with. Other than that, we are free to put things on the wall, to put things on our sign. Now, let me just tell you, if we went crazy and rewrote our documents of faith, they would want to hear about it. And they might choose to no longer allow us to associate with them. But we choose to associate. And so we bring in some tithes and offerings. Did you know we send them tithes and offerings? Did you know we send money to different missionaries? I've asked several times, does anybody know the name of any of our missionaries? Anybody know the name of any of them? Like what one? Anybody? The Kaisers, where do they serve? In Baja. Okay, anybody else? Louder. The Hulettes, where are they? Japan. Anybody know anybody else? Louder. Where do they serve? We have people in Miami serving all around the world. We have people serving in places that are so Muslim-oriented, we can't even tell you that person's name. When I served at the church in Georgia, somebody came in with this great big Persian rug, and I rolled it out expecting it to be able to fly. I was going to be Riyadh. And it didn't. But the greatest thing is it was made by a group of ladies from Iran. Now, when you think the name Iran, how many of you go, anybody? Iran. But this group of ladies were the mothers of the men who played on the Iran basketball team, the Olympic basketball team. And the coach of that basketball team was placed by the Southern Baptist Convention. He was a missionary to Iran. And his job as a missionary was to be the coach of the Iran basketball team. And we supported them big time. And they brought a Persian rug. Now, how many of us know that we've got missionaries serving in places where it's illegal to be a missionary? And it's because of your tithes and offerings that that's happening. It's because of what God has blessed you. So when you bring your tithes and offerings to this temple, it is to keep the lights on. It is to keep the children's ministry going. It is to keep the electronics going. And to buy the new electronics that we so desperately need. Or time on the internet so that Dave's family can watch him preach. And things like that. But it is also so that people in Muslim-controlled countries could have a missionary that they don't even know they have a missionary. And beyond. This little church is changing the world by the way in which you folks graciously give. Why did they do this? At the end of the chapter it says this, at the end of verse number 39. We will not neglect the house of our God. We will not neglect the house of our God. How many of us know that this word here for house is bayit? Anybody ever see that around the church anywhere? I've had people come up to me recently and said, what's bayit mean? I said, if you were one of the people, I said, just give me a couple of weeks. But I'll tell you in advance. Bayit in Hebrew has 3 different meanings. Number 1, it's the house where you learn. And so if you see bayit on a building, it means that is a building where you should go in to learn. We will not neglect the house where we learn. But it also means the inner dungeon. And so we are either learning by choice or we are learning by consequence. But we should be learning. Isn't that what really the dungeon ought to be? A place where you go to learn from your mistakes. Wouldn't you rather learn from God's grace than have to be punitively punished because of our bad choices? Both of them are the bayit of our God. Now, the bayit also means more than just the building. It means the household. The New Testament doesn't require tithing, but let's remember, in Matthew 5:17, Jesus said that I have come that not one letter of the law would be abandoned or abolished. My intention of the law was so that every single bit, every jot, every tittle in the Greek, every iota, every kiera, would be completely magnified to the highest degree. I heard one preacher say this one time. In the Old Testament, God only required you to give 10%. In the New Testament, if the illustration is Jesus, he requires to give it all. Because Jesus didn't just give 10% of his life on Calvary. He gave all of his life. There was a man who was shipwrecked on an island, and he was telling everybody, don't worry, they will find us. Don't worry, they will find us. Don't worry, they will find us. He was just so positive all the time. And everybody finally looked at him and he said, how can you stay so positive? He says, I am one of the richest people in our state, and I tithe. My pastor will find us. Let's turn to Psalms 19. How do we then have the attitude of a cheerful giver that Paul talks about? The attitude of a cheerful giver that Nehemiah 10 talks about. We're going to take a look at verses 7 through 11. The law of the Lord is perfect. What does it do? It revives the soul. When I tithe, it ought to give me an adrenaline rush. When I sing, it ought to give me an adrenaline rush. When I serve in the nursery, it ought to give me an adrenaline rush. And when I am truly serving God God's way, the law of the Lord, doing God's law, revives my soul. The testimony of the Lord is true. I believe that God's word will also change my heart, making wise the simple. It will not only encourage me in my heart, it will encourage me in my mental understanding of who God is. The precepts of the Lord are right. Again, talking about what? The law. This is David talking about the law. Rejoicing the heart. Again, he is saying, when I obey the Lord, it just makes me happy. That's why the Bible says we ought to be hilarious givers. Hilarious givers. And not only does it make my heart good, but the commandment of the Lord, again talking about the law of the Lord, the commandment of the Lord is pure. It enlightens my eyes. It gives me deeper insight into who I am and why I'm giving and the greatness of the gift, not because of the giver, because of what God could do with it. Now, if God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, which he does, correct? Why doesn't he just go ahead and sell one of his cows? Because he knows the discipline and the delight that comes upon us when we actually do the law of the Lord. Verse number 9, the fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The fear remembers the respect, the honor, the worship of the Lord is clean, endures forever. The rules of the Lord, again going back to the law, to the Ten Commandments, the rules of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. And that word in Hebrew for altogether means for altogether forward. It will never become passé. It will never become New Testamentized. The law of the Lord is the law of the Lord altogether forever. More to be desired than gold, even fine gold, sweeter also than honey, and drippings of the honeycomb. In other words, all the things that we think we can materialistically buy with the money we think we have made, none of that will account to anything as much as obeying the law of the Lord. The reviving of the soul and the refreshment of the spirit. Moreover, notice, he just can't stop. Moreover than all of that, by them is your servant warned, and keeping them there is a great reward. There is a reward in being obedient. And the reward is consistent, continual blessings from God. Now here's what a thing I found. The biggest communication problem in the world today is we no longer listen to understand. We only listen to reply. Anybody get that? That the whole time somebody is laying out their thesis, the first thing we're thinking is, instead of trying to understand what they're saying, first thing we're doing is trying to come up with a debate. I don't know how many times that's the way people come to church. Go to Bible study. Go everywhere they go. No matter what they're listening to. Am I really listening? We will never effectively share the gospel with the lost person if we don't take the time to listen to what's really bothering them. Jesus could hear them. Paul said, I become all things to all people, so that by some means I will know how to reach them with the goodness of Jesus Christ. I've got to listen to understand. And what did it say in Psalms? When I listen to the law. When was the last time you said, man, I can't wait to go back and reread Genesis, Exodus. I can't wait to dig into Leviticus. Because when we listen to the law, it revives the soul, refreshes the heart, and brings warning of blessings to the reader and the doer. We need to listen to the law. We need to listen to the Bible, not so that we can respond to it and debate about it, so that we can just apply it and in Psalms again, 19:8, it says, the law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. So first question I have to ask myself is, what refreshes you? I was thinking about all of you. I was thinking about what refreshes you. Because you know what refreshes you might not be what refreshes you. For some people, refreshing is up in the mountains. For some people, it's down on the beach. For some people, it's eating a big meal. For some people, it's going on a jog. I mean, we are so different. But you know what? No matter how different we are individually, the law of the Lord refreshes all of God's children. So no matter where you are, it shouldn't be the mountain that refreshes you, but how the mountain reminds you of the law of the Lord in Jesus himself. It shouldn't be the beach that refreshes you. But the beach is where you can really see the rolling waves that remind you of God's roll of grace consistently, continually into your life. It says in Psalms 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Now, I shall not want can also be interpreted, I shall not be in want. Meaning, I don't want to want for myself. If the Lord is my shepherd, I can have dependence upon him to give me everything I need. The Lord is my shepherd, he'll take care of me. If I was to rewrite that passage in the truly New International Ray version, it would say this: the Lord is my shepherd, I got everything I need. And so even when he says give 10% and go give tithes and offerings, I can believe this, that if the Lord is my shepherd, he will make sure that I get everything I need to take care of everything I need to take care of. And maybe the things that I don't have is because he knows I don't need it. How many of us, I'm thinking about a new guitar. I'm thinking about it. Looked it up. Watched the video. Price checked in several different places. Can't afford any of them. But I know God wants me to have it. Right? Isn't that the way it goes? I know God wants me to have it. Why? Well, he wouldn't have given me the internet to do all the price checks. You see how we can rationalize away anything. If the Lord is my shepherd, he will make sure I get all I need. He will make sure. I don't have to worry about Ray. God can do a much better job of caring for me than I can of worrying about me. The Lord is my shepherd. He makes me lie down in green pastures. And when I do, when I lie down in these green pastures, what's the very next? He restores my soul. God's word restores my soul. So how do we delight in the Lord? Let's take a look at just a couple of others. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in that law he will meditate day and night. How do we delight in the Lord? We've got to spend time in the Word. How do we delight in the Lord? Psalms 19, verses 8 through 10. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. How do we rejoice in the Lord and delight in our lives? Psalms 40, verse 8. I delight to do your will. It is one thing to spend time in the Word, but then to turn around and not do it. The delight is in the doing. The proof is in the pudding, as some might say. Psalms 119, over and over and over and over again. What does it say? I will delight myself in your statutes. I will become delirious in your statutes. I will not forget. How then do we delight in the Lord? It's just a choice. And we are not defined, hear me, we are not defined by our good intentions. We are defined by our choices. Let's pray. Father, again, I want to thank you for today. I want to thank you for this book called Nehemiah. I want to thank you for this man called Nehemiah. I want to thank you for his diligence and love and perseverance. The way in which he would plan, the strength he had as a leader, even when everything and everyone seemed to be against him. He knew that he was doing it for you and that you had sent him, and he resolved in his heart that he would not shrink back. Father, for him it seemed like he had a do or die, and you blessed abundantly in 52 days. Father, I just pray for us that we would have that 52-day do or die as well. Lord, not just so we could count off 52 days, but to be able to say that I